What's up, y'all? Start from the top and then go down. Just opposing some things like gravity. Okay, we dropped into the frame is the point for those of you in audio only. This is episode 1. we can say it like this. This is episode 1 of the 200s. This is episode 200, though, of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. Wow, big things, huh? Dante, the standard poodle, he's here, my dog. This is episode 200 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. And this is Little Red, the guitar, Little Johnson JG610R. He's probably out of tune. And then not only that, we'll place the capo on the 4th fret just to see. What that sounds like. We'll go from here, we'll do what we do. Might play some guitar throughout. Today is the 6th of January. It's okay, come. 2026. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company, and this is In the Image Clothing Company podcast. Yeah, 200, episode 200 is where we're at. The title of this episode, though, it is Measuring Truth. I was just waiting for Dante to get comfortable. Yikes. We talk about the truth of all things here on In the Image Clothing Company podcast. And who am I to say? Well, I'm not, okay? We discuss the gospel of Jesus Christ. We call it the truth of all things. God calls it the truth of all things. Jesus Christ is God, is an episode title of In the Image Clothing Company. I say it in every aspect of anything. Don't believe me, Evan Strong. I say it just as me, but then also me, Evan Strong, being the founder of In the Image Clothing Company and this for life to lead it. Don't believe In the Image Clothing Company. Don't believe any of our team members, human being-wise, but also our poodles. We will have many as time progresses. Okay, 1/4 of In the Image Clothing Company is In the Image Clothing Company poodles. We'll get into it, right? Letting dogs stay natural is the slogan on In the Image Clothing Company poodles. The point is, though, we do things how we do. Blunt, bold, raw, and real. But if you don't believe in anything ever, things have to still exist. Things have to still be there. There still has to be stuff. At least you, right? If you have the ability to believe something or to not believe it, well, you have to exist. And so you can't have a belief on where you came from. You only came from where you came from. You can't drive down the street from where you were and have a belief you came from somewhere you didn't. You only came from where you came from. So the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news of God, is what that translates into literally. Dante, I'll smack you so hard. I don't know what's, and I will too, okay? I don't know what's on the floor here, but there's something on the floor stuck in the carpet. And I don't think I put it here. I don't think I dropped it there. We've had some work on the ceiling in here and, drywall type stuff. If it's that, I definitely don't want him eating that. It's toxic. If it's just like food, which I don't know how that would have gotten right there, then maybe it's not all that terrible, but I don't know what it is. Oh! That brings us to this episode's title, though. You don't know what something is, but it still is what it is. Well, regardless of if I know what is on the carpet here, it's still only what's on the carpet here. This is truth, okay? It's apart from all of us. It's there regardless. If you don't even care to care, if you don't believe in anything, if you don't even have an opinion, well, that's great. That's where we get to truth. We put ourselves aside. That's how we get to God. And that's the point with God having one of his many names being the truth. Okay. The truth is truth, regardless of if you want it to be, regardless of if you believe it is. How does that even make sense? What are we talking about? The truth of what? Who's disputing something? Well, everybody always has some kind of dispute in some kind of way about some kind of thing. Just about, at least. Dante, I want to smack you so hard right now. Come. Hey. Sit on my on my lap, kind of, but just in my lap, really. We're going to talk about this. We're on episode 200 right now of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. I say we discuss the truth. I say don't believe us because you don't have to. What does this mean? How do we understand? How do we get to it? There's a lot of episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, just 1/4 of In the Image Clothing Company, where we discuss truth. I mean, and for the sake of the title of the episode, believe it or not, don't. You don't need to believe in God. The point is, he's still there even if you don't believe in him. And believe it or not, don't. The point is, if you believe in something or you don't, it's still what it is. You don't have to believe at all, So who's really right then? And the point is, nobody, but God always is truth. Anyway, the point with all of this discussion on truth is that it's there even if you don't discuss it. That's what's so interesting about truth is who cares? You don't have to. But it still applies to you, it still affects you, and it still is what it is, even if you don't want it to be. Okay? So this episode's title, episode 200 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, titled Measuring Truth. The point is, how are we going to know, right? Well, how could you know is an episode title of In the Image Clothing Company podcast as well. Well, the Spirit of God brings all things to our remembrance. The Spirit of God dwells within all things that allow him to, anything holy enough to. He doesn't dwell within unholy temples. We can talk about all these things, and if you don't know what I'm saying, you're like, well, you're just preaching something you believe. No. But how do we measure truth? That's the point. How do we measure... Oh, Dante. How do we measure truth? Okay. I was in Institute tonight, which is just a weekly night class, like church on Sunday, essentially, like a Sunday school class that's not on Sunday. Today is a Tuesday. It's the 6th of January, 2026. Dante and I filmed a video on the main site of In the Image Clothing Company today titled, The Jaw is the Shoulder. Okay, the 6th of January, 2026. What are you doing, Doug? Yeah. Yeah, man, he just loves to be loved. That's the case for everybody. Look at him, man. He's like a cat nuzzling up against me the way that they do, Anyway, measuring truth, because you can have all the opinions you want, but how do you get down to truth? Well, truth is the thing that's undisputed, but how do you not dispute it? Well, you measure it. And how do we know what that means? Well, truth is apart from all of us. Measurements, mathematics, it's apart from all of us. Under In the Image Clothing Company's main site, that's what we do. Really, we allow the body to work of the human being by putting focus on anything that clothes the human body. Okay, our company name, our 5-word name, 5 words with no spaces between them, In the Image Clothing Company. We're designed in the image of God, in the image of Jesus Christ, the man who is God. Yikes, don't believe me. We're a clothing company. Anything that clothes the body. Okay, clothing, sure, yes, but glasses, jewelry, even just eating, standing, walking, sitting, sleeping, breathing, hydration, doing everything we do as a human being, we discuss, and doing it naturally. The goal is natural on all 4 sides of In the Image Clothing Company. So letting dogs stay natural, there you go, right? We do the same thing we do for human beings. We allow the clothing to fit correct and stay centered, and in all the ways we can in this unnatural modern man-made world placed onto God's natural earth, have our clothing be made from 100% natural materials. A lot of things that we deal with nowadays just didn't exist just tens of years back from today's date, the 6th of January, 2026. And so what happens is the body... it gets into patterning. That's really what we do on the main side of In the Image Clothing Company. We get out of chronic patterning that's been built up in the body through scar tissue, through bone spurs. Muscles connect to bones through ligaments. No, they don't, though. Muscles connect to bones through tendons, and then bones connect to bones through ligaments. There's just a thin layer of cartilage between the bones, which is called cushioning, if you will, or cushioning, that is called cartilage. The bones are only shaped the way that they are. Muscles only pull, they do. That's all they do. The human body only pulls is a video under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company. So even in what seems like a push, the body's only pulling endpoints of muscles together, but we can do that to close a hinge joint or to extend a hinge joint because there's opposing muscles, there's opposition in all things, there's light because there's dark, there's warmth because there's cold. Anyway, we get into it in depth, and we say these things often because that's the truth, you know? And the truth is something you can never say too much. You can never wear out the name of Jesus Christ, who is the truth, right? I say it like this. When I say the phrase, there is only one way the human body could ever work, that's when I say often, that's a phrase I can never overuse or oversay because it's the truth. The body has neutral positions it resides in, otherwise it doesn't work. Anyway, I want to get to the title of this episode. I mean, we need to give context where we do, right? And that's a little bit of context on 3 of the forwards of In The Image Clothing Company now given in here. But this is episode 200, you know, and how do we know? Well, we can measure it. We can go back and we can count mathematically from 1 to the next number that is 2, and then the next number is 3, and the next one will be 4, and then 5, and we keep counting up until we get to 200. And so, you know, if they weren't numbered, you know, and then titled and labeled, you can still go through and see that, you know, here's a video. It's also just an audio only, right? It's an episode of In The Image Clothing Company podcast. And then here's another one, and another one, and another one, and maybe there's no labeling to them, but you can count each individual one, and you can measure how many there are. And as of this one, there's 200 episodes of In The Image Clothing Company podcast. And that's the truth, even if I didn't believe that it was. That's the thing about mathematics. And what I was saying with that's what we do on the main site of In The Image Clothing Company, there's a video under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company titled The Human Body is Just Mechanics. And the human body is just a mechanical machine placed onto the rock in space that is our Earth. That's just the truth, right? What we do in the body, people who know the anatomy of the human body, which we do under In The Image Clothing Company, we discuss the anatomy of the human body in depth. Deeply do we discuss it. And we just do. Again, I couldn't claim it. You can go check out many hundreds of videos under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company alone as of today's date, the 6th of January, 2026. And you can see our thorough discussions. We know what we're saying, so don't believe us. Because truth is truth, and we can measure it. We can measure the mathematical angles of the body. And so that's what people do, right? You can measure the rotations of the body. There's a neutral in the forearms from the fingertips to the elbow. Then we have internal rotation and external rotation. There's a neutral from the fingertips to the shoulder. We lock the arm out at the elbow. The hand becomes the shoulder. And then there's internal rotation and external rotation. And these are measurable degrees of rotation. Like how we can measure the degree in Fahrenheit or Celsius of the temperature of the atmosphere of our planet. Measuring truth. We can't dispute it. You can't say that it's a temperature that it isn't if it's the temperature that it is. You can't move the body, being just a machine with rotations, a certain amount of degrees measurement in rotation internally from its neutral and claim you did it in any other degree of measurement. You can measure it. Measuring truth. It's undisputed. It's apart from all of us. Even if math didn't exist, math would exist. Even if you didn't believe in God, he'd still be there. You can just, measure truth. Truth is truth. It's nothing you could decide. Because even if we didn't have the numbers 1, 2, and 3 in the English language or in Spanish, right? Let me say this correct. I don't really speak Spanish, but I know I know a small amount of Spanish currently. Uno, dos, tres, right? We have numbers and we have words that align with the numbers, but even if we didn't have words that align with the numbers, we'd still have the amount of things. If I grab here one shirt, and then I grab another shirt, and I grab another shirt, well, even if I didn't have a number and I could say I grabbed 3 shirts, I could hold them in my hand and I could say, and then I could say, and then I could say, and that's me physically, tangibly touching what we label as three separate things. But the mathematics is there, even if there's not a number through a word, meaning if there's not a word that we label a number as, the word three means, okay, and that's a shirt, and then this, that's a shirt, and then this, that means three. The amount of something, even if there's no word three, there's still the amount of these shirts here. They're just what they are. Truth is just truth. Even if I couldn't tell you what this was, I can explain to you what this is. I can have you take your hands and you can go like this. And you can touch this thing, that thing, and that thing. Even if there's no word that was three or trace, right? Three in the English language, trace in Spanish, and there's many languages, just sounds we speak as human beings that we call words that we assign meanings to that explain to us that. That's what I mean. Truth is truth. It's undisputed. If you don't speak the same language as someone, you still have the shirts there. What are shirts? So that's just a word. Really, these things are just a bunch of little strands of plant material we call cotton, which is just a word. Even plant material, that's just two words to describe something as it is that just grows out of the ground, but even growing and ground and out of those are all just words. There's only truth. Truth is not words, but the word is the truth. Another name for God is the word. So God, being the truth, is also the word. The point is, things are only what they are. This is what I mean. I couldn't possibly have an opinion on anything that mattered, and no other human being ever could. That's how it is if you're not religious, or if you're the most religious. If you don't believe in anything, or if you've got all the beliefs in the world that you're just so lost. You can believe so strongly you know exactly what's going on to the point where you have no idea what's happening. Your beliefs will drive you to hell. Your opinions will drive you to hell. And if not, your friends and family will drive you there for yourself, because it drives people nuts. When you believe so strongly about something and you're wrong, there's only truth. Nobody could decide. No human being could ever decide truth. No human being could ever take credit for truth. So that's what I say. As the founder of In The Image Clothing Company, in this for life, me, Evan Strong, I couldn't take credit for it. I'd be delusional. I couldn't decide something that's accurate. I can just know something that's accurate. You can't decide truth. You can only know truth. You can measure truth. There's three shirts, but really there's just, what there is there. And how do we know if you don't know what the word three means? Somebody speaks only Spanish and they come up to you and say, however, you say the other words to say this, but they tell you that there's trace shirts there, What if you don't know what they're saying as far as you don't speak the Spanish language, you don't speak English, and somebody says three? How are you going to know how many things are there? Well, because they're there. You can touch them. Okay, now you've touched the items of what do we even call it, Matter. Matter cannot be created or destroyed. You're correct. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, meaning always. He's always been just as he is. He'll never change. Neither will the amount of matter that exists. You can measure that, You can put these three things we could call shirts on a scale and measure the weight. How much it weighs. And so maybe you don't know the numbers on the scale, but the shirts still weigh how much the shirts weigh. Maybe you're reading the scale and it's in Spanish, or it's in English, or it's in any possible language on the earth at any time period ever. As I say, clothing for every body who has one, or every one who has a body, which is every human being to ever live. it's got to sit in the same location, right? Clothing sits for a man, a woman, a tall person, short person, a fat person, a skinny person, a person from any part of the earth, or someone from any time period to ever be, and any age. I was like, what's the 9th thing? Because the 10th one is just because I have 10 fingers, and so it works out. You're just a human being. We're all the same thing, placed on the same earth, designed by the same God. We're just this human body. It's universally designed in the image of God. You couldn't deny that. You can measure the amount of bones in the body, and you can have a deformity, a birth defect, a major surgery, an amputation that altered your body, has or might. Ooh, wow. Who knows the future? God does. But you can be set apart quite a bit, or a little bit, be slightly different, or we could do it all lyrical. You could be set apart quite a bit, a little bit, something that makes you different. It doesn't matter about this or that. In fact, just a human being. You've been doing things all your life, trying to find what the truth of life is, and actually it just is what it is, even if you don't want it to be. Sorry, man. In the Image Clothing Company music, we do a lot with lyricism, rhythm and poetry, spoken word, singing, guitar playing, geared around the gospel of Jesus Christ with the messages. We show the sizing and setup of guitar to not alter the neutral wrist, and the rounding in our hands through radius in guitar. The hands are round only, but only if the feet are unaltered. So in the Image Clothing Company shoelace technique, which is the only way the top of the feet are shaped, and the importance of zero drop shoes, which is the bottom of the feet being flat on the surface of our earth. Anyway, we talk about a lot of things in life, like fingernails and toenails, and how we need to measure them to the very tips of the fingers and toes to back them fully and support them. Cut relatively flat on the tips so we can stay in that neutral wrist and neutral gripped arch in the foot. The feet arches oppose the center line of the human body and grip inward, keeping us vertical on Earth's gravity. Earth has a centered gravity pole that you can measure through angles, right? The human body has a centered line, the sternum, the spine, the trachea, the nose, and our jaw. The jaw stabilizes the entire body. That video Dante and I filmed today under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company. The jaw is this shoulder, okay? Directly connects to this shoulder. So the point is, we can measure things. You can measure the amount of bend in your arm at the elbow. Okay, keeping elbows at the natural waist. First off, that's a video under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company. It's the thing we have to do. The elbow is the shoulder directly connected through the upper arm bone, which is the humerus, and the shoulder has a neutral height to it. You can measure, even if you don't know what the numbers mean. It just is what it is. You can take a rope and you can put the rope up to something and pinch a part of the rope on one part of something and go to the other part of the rope and then pinch that, and you can see the distance between there. Even if there's no numbers involved, the distance between there is still the distance between there. Measurements are measurements. Math is math. Truth is truth. God is God. There's no opinion. And truth is apart from all of us, and it'll never change. There's 60 seconds in a minute. You can measure it, and it'll never change. And how do you measure it? Well, it's the sun and the earth and the rotations and the revolutions of that happening. There's the moon that just kind of does its thing as well. It's doing it no matter if you have a care about it or think you have a say on it. Truth is truth. It's apart from all of us. You can measure it, though. You can measure how long it takes by sticking a stick in the ground and watching the shadow move to see the sun going across the sky in a day. You can measure the distance. Even if you don't know anything about numbers, you can have a foot on the bottom of your body and another foot. They usually oppose the center line of the body and grip arches inward to keep you vertical, keeping 2 points of contact in the feet. A video under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company, Dante and I filmed. Okay. You can measure truth, and it's absolutely undisputed unless you're entirely delusional. Nobody could decide it. Nobody's going to decide how long it takes the sun to go across the sky. You can try to explain it in all sorts of different ways, but the truth is truth. You can measure it. You can measure it with your hands. You can put your hands up like this, extend your arm out straight like they do when they're trying to find their way across the waters. Shout out to Moana. Shout out to Moana by Disney. In all truth, that's amazing. I love the movie, okay? It's got a lot of beautiful gospel of Jesus Christ messages in it. It truly does. A lot of movies do, even if you don't see it, because it's the truth. Things are there, even if you don't see it, you can measure it. You can measure it. What you can do, though, is you can put your hand up and measure the distance of the stars between each other, or the distance of the stars from the horizon of the planet that we're on, that is Earth, or the distance of the sun from the horizon of the Earth, and you can measure it with, how many hand distances you have between the horizon and the sun, for example, or the horizon and a certain accumulation of stars together that we can call a constellation. It seems like they're looking like a shape of something, but really they're just big balls of fire out there somewhere, so I've been told. I've never been there to see myself, though, but we can measure it with our hands, at least. You measure horses' height in hands. That's a good point. We can measure poodles at the withers, at the top of the shoulders, in inches, right, in standard measurement, or you can use metric measurement, and it can be centimeters, millimeters, whatever it is, meters. But what's the meter you're measuring it with? What's the meter of measurement that you understand it is what it is, or you don't know what it is, and whatever it is, even if you don't know it. Anyway, truth is truth. That's the thing. Truth is always truth. You measure horses with hands. Okay, that's how they do it. The height of horses, that's what you call it, hands. Where you could literally put your hand down at the foot of the horse, the hoof of the horse, whatever you call it, right? Go up the horse's legs, stacking your hands on top of each other, and you get to the top of the horse, and you know how tall the horse is. Okay, I've never actually personally measured a horse or learned how to, but that's what it means. They measure it in hands. Well, in standard measurements, right, like we do in the United States of America here, where we are, Dante and I, we live up Utah, the state of Utah in the United States of America, under In the Image Clothing Company, for the sake of the beautiful, diverse nature, for the sake of church history within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is where I was tonight, okay, at the Institute class, and this idea came up of measuring truth, And I'm like, all right, cool, let's talk about it under In the Image Clothing Company podcast. The ability to measure truth, to show people that there is universal truth, even if you don't want to believe there is, that's fine, you can be delusional. And that's not me being mean by any means. I'm not trying to be mean, but I mean what I mean. That's entirely delusion. You can take a measurement of something and it's only what it is. You can believe it's something else and you're wrong. You're lying to yourself and God. Anyway, yeah, we have our feet and we measure things in feet. Okay, a lot of people's feet, a lot of human beings' feet are 1 foot measurement. 12 inches, in this standard measuring system that we use here. I mean, that's the thing, is it's literal. That's what I say, the gospel of Jesus Christ, it's literal wording. It's the truth of all things. The truth is, on a measuring tape, we measure things in feet. And there's a lot of human beings' feet who are the length of 12 inches, which is 1 standard measurement foot. That's where it comes from, like measuring horses in hands. It's literal. Okay. What I'm saying is you can measure truth and you just can't dispute it. Or you're delusional. And that's it. Measuring truth, we have a lot of things that this can be seen with, and it's universal. Because truth is always universal, or it's not truth. That's what defines truth, is it's universal, unchanging. Okay? You can measure truth, and you can't dispute it, or you're wrong. I would be as well. I'm not preaching to you out of me. I'm preaching to you, speaking on behalf of God, because God is the truth. But yeah, there's angles of measurement in the body. There's rotations in the body. There's rotations in the lower leg from the foot to the knee. from the neutral, pinky toe straight forward, internal rotation and external rotation. Neutral, locked out at the knee, it's like locking out the elbow and the hand becomes the shoulder. Well, when we lock out the knee, the foot becomes the hip. And then we've got internal rotation from the neutral, pinky toe straight forward, and external rotation back to the neutral and the entire leg from the foot to the hip. We have different length toes and you can measure it. You know, there's only one way the human body could ever work and you can measure it. And they do. A lot of times they will, you know, chiropractors or physical therapists, good ones, they'll take the time to really assess your body and they'll measure it. Yikes. You know, we pivot on this collarbone, the clavicle connecting from the center line of the body at the base of our throat and the top of our sternum. It comes up and out and becomes the peak of the shoulder. And as our shoulder moves up and down, we pivot on this collarbone and we can measure the movement up and in or down and out of the collarbone. It's measurable. This is us measuring truth. The truth is there's a neutral to the height of the shoulder. There's no opinion that anyone could ever have. The truth is, In The Image Clothing Company is, always has been, and always will be huge because we speak on things that we couldn't decide. We do it imperfectly, but it's truth. It's measurable, and you'll never get a different measurement as long as it's correct. And what decides it being correct or not? Measuring it. No one can decide. You know, you can talk to someone about how far do you think it is from here to there? And anyone can have their opinion on it. Anyone can have a belief about it. Somebody can say, well, dude, it's probably about 4 feet. And someone's like, no, dude, it's got to be like 40 feet. And you're like, 40 feet? Really? You know? I'm pretty sure it's more like 4 feet. That's absolutely unbelievable that could be 40 feet away. Are you serious? And you're like, well, don't believe it. Let's measure it. And you measure how many feet it is. And that's the truth. A foot is 12 inches. An inch is, well, as big as it is. You know, there's an inch broken down into 16ths, into eighths, into fourths, into halves, into 32nds, though, even doubling 16ths. You know, the point is you can measure it. You can take something and break it in half, go from 1 inch down to half an inch. You can break that in half, a measurement, cutting it directly in half so there's equal measured pieces. Now, from 1/2 to 1/4. From 1/4 to 1/8, it's directly in half. From 1/8 to 1/16, it's directly in half. From 1/16 to 1/32, it's directly in half. To 1/32, you know, cut in half again, it's 1/64. Anyway, the point is, it's measurable. You can measure it through weight, you know? Let's say you've got, like, dough. You're making bread, or you're making a pizza. You're making pasta. You're making anything else the Italians eat. You know? Right? No, but you're making anything like that. Let's say you've got dough, right? Like you make bread with, you know, when the dough rises and becomes the bread. You can measure it, man. You can put it on a scale and see how much it weighs. And then you can break it in half and put it on 2 sides of a scale. And one side can be falling down as the other side's coming up. And so you take some off the side that's falling down and put it on the side that was coming up until it levels out and evens out, right, on a scale with, you know, teetering in the middle with weight on either side on Earth's center of gravity that you can measure. There's only truth. There's universal truth. There has to be. There can't not be. You can measure it. Undisputed. You don't have to speak the same language as someone. You can both measure the same thing. You don't have to even know how numbers work the same way someone else knows it. You can measure something like this, you know, through a scale with no numbers on it, but there's a center to the scale and then a bar going across that center, and then on either side of it you can place weight and it'll just tip to one side with gravity's centered pull from the center of the scale. If there's more weight on one side, and you can put more weight on the other side, and it'll tip to the other side with gravity's centered pull from the center of the scale. The scale teeters on the center, and we can measure where the center is. We can measure the amount of physical weight and, density of something on either side without mathematical numbers. This is still math. The numbers are just symbols or words. Words are just symbols. But you can measure things, and it's undisputed, and it'll never change. The measurement of something is the measurement of something. This guitar is the size that it is. If I measure it in standard measurement feet, if I measure it in metric millimeters, centimeters, okay? Yeah, inches, whatever I try to measure this in. If I measure the length of this guitar and how many books of this size book it takes to get from one end of the guitar to the other end of the guitar, that's the truth. Is if I put this book, this is the Quad Scriptures in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Quad meaning there's 4 books in here: the Holy Bible, the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and Pearl of Great Price. Okay, we discussed this. We read the Word of God. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Read the Word of God, meaning the Scriptures of Jesus Christ. Okay. I place this book at one end of the guitar, and I measure where it stops. And then I put it where it stopped the first time, and I measure it to where it stops the second time. Oh, but if I don't know if there's 1, 2, and then so forth, I don't have to have numbers, but we can just see how many books, let's say I had multiple of them. The book's only the length the book is, even if I don't know how to measure it, I'm holding it. It's truth, it's tangible, it's this. Listen, because you don't have to even see it. This is the book. And you know that by hearing it. That's your body measuring the intake of sound waves through its ear canal. That's no joke. I mean, this is truth. That's what I mean. It's undisputed. It's undisputed. It's undisputed. Anyway, because it's undisputed. It's undisputed, It's undisputed. Anyway, we could go down the whole length of the guitar with this book and see how many books it takes to get from one end of the guitar to the other end of the guitar. That's the length of the guitar. And we could break that length up into whatever amount of chunks of that length that we could evenly measure, and that's the truth still, The guitar is the length in millimeters that it is, but it's also the length in centimeters that it is. It's the length in inches that it is. It's the length in feet that it is. The guitar is the length in hands that it is. It's the length in books that it is. The guitar is the length in this marker, this pen here that it is. But it's also the length in Dante's tail that it is. Okay, my dog, Dante, my standard poodle here. We can measure it. It doesn't matter what you're measuring it with. It's still only the length that it is. Anything else we use to try to measure it, that's just our understanding of how long the guitar is. We don't need anything else besides the guitar to be able to have the guitar be the measurement that it is. Things are only what they are. You can measure it. It's impossible to have an opinion on it that matters. I could believe this guitar is any length that I want to believe it is. I could have an opinion on this guitar saying, I don't think it could be as long as it is. Hypothetically, right? Sure, you can say that. You're wrong. It is the length that it is because what we're talking about is how long it is. It is how long it is, right? God is who God is. That's what I say. We discuss Jesus Christ, God himself, as he says that he is. We don't get to decide. I don't get to decide how long this guitar is, but I can measure the truth of it, and I can know. And even if I don't know how long it is, it's still how long it is. It doesn't matter if I know it. Well, other than, showing the sizing of guitars to not alter the body, sure, so our body's length, that's the point, right? So the length of our arms line up with the size of the guitar, with our wrist at a neutral measurement from one side to the other side. You can measure it in feet, in inches. Well, you're probably not going to measure your wrist in feet distance from one side to the other side, unless you have, extremely large hands, okay? But you can measure it in anything. And it is the measurement that it is, even if you don't measure it. Just like truth is truth, even if you don't want to believe it. It doesn't matter. You don't have to believe in anything. You don't need to believe in God. That episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, but you can measure that he's there. And that's a little bit of a tricky subject to try to explain, how you can measure God. We'll never measure up to God in this life. That's just, the point is, God is the truth. And so anything you're measuring that's just as it is, that's what it is. Just like God is just who he is. That's why it's kind of hard to explain who God is sometimes, right? But you can know who he is. That's what's so interesting about it, you know? It's like, how can you explain how long a foot is? Well, you know, it's 12 inches. Well, sure, you know, how can you explain how long a centimeter is? Well, it's 10 millimeters. Well, sure, but what if you don't know how long an inch is or how long a millimeter is? Do you break it down smaller? That probably won't help you either, you know. But you can have an understanding of it, even if you don't fully understand it. You can measure it, and you know that it just is what it is. You know, like what I was saying, somebody could think like, man, that's only about 4 feet away. And somebody could say, no, it's 40 feet away, you know, 10 times as far as you thought. And you're like, well, I don't believe it. So that's fine. We'll measure the truth of how far away it is. And no one can dispute it. Take your own 2 feet and walk over there, see how far it is. You know, let's say if your feet were the length of a foot measurement. Or if your question is, how many of your own feet do you have to put one in front of the other to get to that thing? And the person says 4, and the other person says 40. Maybe your foot doesn't actually measure out to be 12 inches long, in the way we decide what an inch is. Check that out. Inches. Inch is. An inch is only as long as an inch is. We talk about God, and God is, right? He's the great I am. Well, an inch is. And so we can measure the inches because the inch is only as long as it is. God is. And there you go, okay? That's what I'm saying. It's literal wording. That could seem like a stretch, you know, in my explanation of it, but no. If I stretched it, it wouldn't be as long as the inch is. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. No, that's funny because that's the truth. That's what I mean. It is what it is. It's only what it is. So you cannot believe it. You can think something's a certain distance away, and you can be wrong. But then you're like, well, how do you get to say that I'm wrong? Because it's only as far away as it is. There's only truth. You can measure it. However you want to measure it, whatever you want to choose to measure it with, it's still only what it is and where it is and as far away from you as it is, as close to you as it is, and whatever. You can measure it. And it's undisputed. You know, you can take this book and say, all right, this book is just this book. Regardless of if we have any numbers at all, this book is as long as this book is. It's not going to change unless we change what the book is. But we're talking about the book, so we're not going to change what the book is, or it wouldn't be the book. When we talk about what the book became, that's now something else, right? Things are only what they are. And in this thing's current state, we call this a book, which is just a word we put on what I'm holding here in my hand. And a hand is just a word, which is just part of my body. But body is just a word, which is this mechanical machine. But a machine is just an explanation of something that has motion. Motion is just a word that derives from something moving, but that's just a word as well. So God is the word, otherwise we don't know what anything is, because we describe what things are by saying the truth of what they are. And so God is the truth, but he's also the word, and things are only what we explain them as, or we're wrong. You can believe in anything, but you're wrong if it's not true. That's what I mean. You couldn't have a dispute. You couldn't have a possible opinion on anything in life. There's only truth. And it's dumbfounding because we still have all the humans out there that don't think there's truth. And it's utter, complete, legitimate, and all cases of everything, delusion. But it's crazy because I'm not like separating myself from others. I'm, an equal to you human being, no matter who you are. We're all equal sons and daughters of God. Man, what does that mean if you don't know what I'm saying? Well, I mean, read the Word of God. That's kind of all I have to say right now. Okay, for that. Yeah, I mean, we could say more, but that's all we're going to say on that right now. The point is, you can measure things, I mean, I used to think that I could decide things. I used to think that I could try to believe in something and have it just work. And then I got hit with the truth. I mean, you can try to believe something's as far away from you as you want it to be with your eyes closed. Like, I could try to believe that I couldn't read the guitar's strings right now if my eyes were closed and I couldn't see that they were right here. But you can measure the truth. And you don't have to know any numbers. Numbers are just what we use to measure truth. You can measure truth with your own hands. I can close my eyes and say, well, no matter how far away or how close I believe red the guitar strings are, I can move my right arm from my shoulder out to my fingertips, really from my spine out to my fingertips, really from where I'm sitting on the earth, though, on my ischiums, or the bottom of my pelvis, the sit bones, up through my spine, and then out to the shoulder, through the collarbone and all the musculature connecting the spine to the shoulder, through the scapula or clavicle and shoulder blade and humerus and upper arm bone. Anyway, those are 3 bones with multiple wording to them. Right, 2 names for the same bone for each of those 3 bones. I'm just measuring the amount of bones that make up the shoulder, and there's 3. What I'm saying is, out the arm, through the humerus, out the radius and ulna, into the hand, through the wrist first, out the end of the fingertips, I can reach out. Oh! And I just measured the truth of how far away the strings on Red the Guitar are with my own body. I didn't have to have any numbers be involved. And I didn't have to know the bones of my body that make up the arm, because I don't know all the bones in the hand, or the, fingers, which are the hand, or the wrist, which is the hand. There's multiple names for the same thing. There's multiple names for God. God is 3 beings, but he's only one. He's the creator of all things. He is all things. He's the great I am. He dwells in everything. But we can measure him to a degree by understanding there's 3 sides to God. If we strum this guitar and strum all 6 strings that we can number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, well, we can count 6 strings, and they're each an individual note, or we can strum all 6 strings at once, and now all 6 strings became 1 note. And how do we do that? How do we know? Who's going to say? How does anyone have an opinion or belief that matters? They don't. Well, who decides then what note it is? We can measure the frequency of the vibrations the strings make. And something that Did I mention the gospel of Jesus Christ is the truth of all things? You go to a physics class, they'll teach you the same thing. You go to a music class, they teach you the same thing. You go to an anatomy class for the human body, or the dogs, they'll teach you the same thing. Truth is truth. And they teach it everywhere they teach something that's accurate or that's correct. There's a correct explanation on how far away from me this is. Even if we don't explain that that's the word we could call a guitar, this is still what it is. And it does this. And it does that when I put my hand from where it is here resting on my legs, sitting on the carpet here, filming episode 200, man. Filming episode 200 of In the Image Clothing Company Podcast. Okay, episode 200 here of In the Image Clothing Company Podcast, titled Measuring Truth. Well, we measured the amount of episodes up to this one. There was 200 of them. Even if you don't know what that number is, you can pick up that many things if each one of these was a thing individually, right? If you could actually hold the video, which you can't really. Not really, but you can measure it. It's crazy because it's just as real as it gets. So my hands here on my legs, on my lap, from them to go where they are resting on my lap to doing this, even if we had no words to explain any of that, even if I didn't say to doing this, but if I just said, you can measure that, right? You can measure that thing happening even if there's no words about it to believe in or not. A lot of times we don't believe people's words, and rightfully so. You shouldn't believe in anything. Truth is truth. The truth is, and we can measure that by taking the distance from my hand being one thing and the guitar strings being the other thing. How far is it from my hand going from its resting state here to moving over to there? What's the distance? You can measure it in anything, and it's as far as it is, even if you measure it in the distance of carpet strands. It's as many carpet strands away as it is. You can measure it in the distance of shoelaces, and it's the distance of shoelaces away that it is. You can measure it in individual hairs pulled out of my standard poodle Dante, and it's the distance of hairs away that it is. But it's the truth. No matter what you're measuring it with, you can measure it, and it can be accurate and undisputed, and that is the truth. You can measure truth. You can't dispute truth. If I tell somebody to find out for me how many of these books in measurement away something is from something else, I could get every single human being on the planet to do it, and if they did it correct, by putting the edge of the book at the starting point, and then the other end of the book is the new end point, but then we move the book from its new end point and put its new starting point at the old end point, then there's a new starting point. And then we put the old end point at the new starting point, and then we put the, old end point at the new starting point. What I mean is, it's like putting one foot in front of the other. The heel of your foot's the starting point. The toes are the end point. And then you put your other foot and its heel at what was the old end point, and now the heel of that foot becomes the starting point. And then the toes of that foot become the new end point. And then you keep going forward, 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 and you measure things by lining them up exactly after each other. If we did that with this book, doesn't matter if we know a number to put on how tall this book is. We know this book is, how long this book is. And every single human on the planet could take this book and line it up, and then move it and line it up, and move it and line it up, just exactly the same book distance each time they moved it. And every single human on the planet today, anyone who was here before us, anyone who will ever be here after us, if they did the same thing with the same book, it'd be the exact same measurement. You can measure truth and it will never change. Because the book doesn't. The thing you're using to measure it is the thing you're using to measure it. And it's only what it is. And it's only the length that it is. Even if you don't know what it is, it's still the length. And you can measure it and find out. It's never going to change it. Whether you measure it or not, it's still the length that it is. It's still truth. But you can measure truth to understand it. Anyway, this is in everything, always, only and ever. Matter cannot be created or destroyed, so you could essentially measure how much matter there is. And it'll never change. Whatever that even could possibly mean, right? It's the truth. I don't understand that, but it's still true because you could measure it. And it's undisputed. Even if you don't get it, even if you don't understand it, it doesn't matter. You can measure God. That's what I mean. God is the truth. God is the unchanging. And things that don't change, well, they are what they are. If they're never going to change, they have to be something. You can't have something that doesn't change if it doesn't exist. Or if something doesn't exist and it never changes, well, you can just measure that it doesn't exist. It's not there. That's a measurement of truth. Do you see what I mean? It's undisputed. What else do we want to talk about? What do we want to talk about, bro? I mean, you fill a vessel with something like a glass or a cup or a bowl or a bucket or a container of some type that can hold water. We all know what water is, even if you don't know what water is, the word water. Water is what water is. And water is something that'll actually dehydrate you, by the way. All that's in water is hydrogen and oxygen. The body can't extract anything from it. It just uses it for functioning. A measurement of hydration is our body's minerals and electrolytes that hold onto water and retain it in the body. If you drink plain water only, it actually flushes out the things that we use to measure the amount of hydration the body has. Just one of those things we discuss under In the Image Clothing Company, that you can measure the amount of fluid in your body. And the more plain water you put in your body, the more plain water will just come out of your body. And the reason we're putting it in is for it to stay in as long as we can, actually, okay? Truth is truth, don't believe me. But don't believe me on this either. You can fill a vessel of something with water, like a cup, a glass, a bucket, whatever it is, okay? A container that holds water, and it's just the amount of water that's in there. You can measure it in liters, in pints, in gallons, in cups, in ounces. You can measure it in... What other measurements do we have like that? That doesn't matter. That's the point. You can measure it in anything. It's still the amount that's there, but you can measure it to have an understanding of it, and it is the measurement that it is, regardless of what you believe about it. You can have a container full of water, and you can believe that it's 3 cups of water. You can believe that it's 4 pints of water. You can believe that it's 7 gallons of water. You can believe that it's 14 liters of water, or whatever it is. A lot, a little, any word of measurement, or whatever, man. There's only the amount of water that's in there. And you can find out how much is in there, because you can use whatever you use to measure it. And it's undisputed, because it's there. Otherwise, it's not. There's only truth. It's either there or it's not. Or you're delusional. I'm not being mean, but that's just the truth. That's what I mean. Truth is truth. Period. Now, this is the big problem. It's a big problem. This is the problem. This is the thing that a lot of people have a big problem with. Let's say it like that, because that's actually how it is. It's not a problem, but this is people's problem with truth. Is how can we say that God is there if we can't measure that God is there? Well, because you have to have an understanding of who God is. What God is unchanging. That's why God's name, one of the many of his, is the truth. Because God is. The amount of water that's in a vessel is the amount of water that's in the vessel. God is who God is. God isn't some being out on a cloud somewhere. God is unchanging. Like how a foot measurement is a foot measurement for me today, as well as my grandparents' grandparents' grandparents, and my grandkids' grandkids' grandkids on either end, as far as you want to go, the measurement's still the same measurement. Even if we call it a different word, or if we don't really use that as a measurement anymore, the length is still what the length is, even if you don't talk about it. I mean, they used to measure things in different ways than they do nowadays. And those measurements are still valid, even if we don't talk about them nowadays. It's like God. I mean, a lot of people don't want to talk about God nowadays. He's still God. Okay? You can measure truth. So measuring truth, that's what I mean, is you can just measure it. It's like a wheel, One Eternal Round is an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. God's course, as he says, is one eternal round, and God is who he says that he is. Well, the precipitation cycle, the circle of life. The earth is a circle or a globe. The sun is a spherical, circular, globular, if that's how you say it, right? The sun is the shape of a globe. The moon is the shape of a globe. Things roll when they're round or spherical or a globe, circular, right? The circumference of something is how we can measure all the way around something that is round or spherical or circular or a globe. There's only truth, and you can measure it. We were talking about sticking sticks in the ground earlier to watch the shadow that you can measure. That's so funny. We were talking about sticking sticks in the ground earlier. Yeah, we're discussing the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm not religious, nor do you need to be. But this is the truth. Let's stick some sticks in the ground so we can watch the shadow move as the sun goes across the sky. And we can measure the shadow move across the ground of our earth. The sun's not really going across the sky. The earth is rotating and revolving around the sun, and we can measure it. You can measure truth. You don't have to believe in anything. Please don't. It'll send you to hell. Your beliefs. There's only truth. God is truth. But you can stick a stick in the ground, and you can attach a rope to it. And however long the rope is, first of all, you can measure that. But then you can take the rope, and on the other end of it, you can have a stick, and you can pull that stick around the first stick in the ground, right? And it's the length of the rope. So you're pivoting around the stick stuck in the ground with a rope attached to it all the way out to another stick, and that second stick is going around the first stick, and you'll draw a circle. You essentially could draw what you could call a perfect circle, meaning measurement-wise, you could have that circle line up in the exact same point you started if you go all the way around the stick in the center. That's a measurement. That's truth. Circles are always circles if they're circles. How do you know what a circle is? You measure it. And there's truth to it. There's mathematics that I don't care so much about. I was just going to start to say some stuff like pi, and all these theories and theorems and equations and things that always line up. Pi is a measurement. They call it pi. I don't even know exactly what it is as of right now. I knew back in school, high school, but I'm not going to try to explain it right now because I don't understand it well enough to explain it. And I try to only speak on things that I know pretty darn well, right? I mean, that's the point. How to be bold, an episode title of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. You do what you can do in all cases to only speak truth, right? Like the episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled, You Don't Know What You're Talking About. Just meaning don't speak if you don't. Okay. So I try not to. I try not to say anything if I don't know anything. Oh, shoot. That's fine. There's a lot that I don't know and never will in this life. There's a lot that I never need to say. But what we can do is measure the amount of stuff we know. Okay, seriously, you can. But you can measure a circle. And circles are only circles, and they'll never be anything else if they are a circle. Squares are only squares. They'll never be anything else if they are a square. Triangles will only be triangles, and they'll never be anything else if they are a triangle. What I mean is, you can measure a square. You can measure 1 foot distance vertically and 1 foot distance horizontally from a center point. And now you have the sides of a square. But you can also have those be the edges of a circle. And so what's the difference between a square and a circle or a triangle? Because even an equilateral triangle you can do the same thing with. That's the crazy thing is math is truth. Math is math. Truth is truth. God is God. You can measure these things. And they'll always be the same. There's equations that always come out to the same answer in every way you could use the math equation, it's always the exact same. It's truth. It's measurable. Okay. What I mean is, you can measure truth. And nobody could dispute it, and nobody could have a breakthrough on it. It's like what I say with the human body. We'll never improve, enhance, or advance. Yeah, that's cool. You'll never improve, enhance, or advance the human being. It's impossible. It's a mechanical machine. The only way it moves is by having opposition. You can measure it. There's a center line, and from there you can go a certain measurement in one direction, only because you can go this same exact measurement in the opposite direction from the neutral, centered, measured position. Otherwise, you wouldn't have any motion. Unless, sure, you started from one position and you moved to another one and you never did anything else. You have to have a neutral to something to have motion. You know, like I say, a vehicle, you can drive forward from the neutral, you can come back to the neutral, or you can drive backward from the neutral, but you have to come back to the neutral. If the neutral didn't exist, there couldn't be forward and back. It's measurable. You can measure truth. It's universal. The only thing you could possibly be doing is being delusional if you didn't think there was universal truth. You can think whatever you want, but if you just thought you could decide, I guess is the point. Like, you can't. It's always the same. Mathematics, well, this is the whole thing about it, is truth. It's ridiculous. This is the whole thing about it. I sound like, I sound because it's what I say. I say these couple phrases often under In the Image Clothing Company with what we discuss, which is truth. To the best of our abilities, is nothing we could ever decide. We try to get to truth so we can discuss it. I say it's as real as it gets, and it's as obvious as it is once you see it. Because mathematics have always been mathematics before human beings ever did them. Before there was ever a human being who did a math equation, that math equation still was what it was. We can only uncover it and measure it. It's always been there. There's no opinion to that. You can get the most scientific person who wants nothing to do with religion, and they'll tell you the same thing. That God, who is Jesus Christ, says. When I say God, who is Jesus Christ, you don't have to believe that Jesus Christ is God. Jesus Christ is God. What you can do is read the words of Jesus Christ, and they align with the same things that someone who wants nothing to do with religion, but everything to do with mathematics or science, right? If they get down to the actual truth through mathematics or science, it aligns with the Word of God, Jesus Christ's words. It's truth. It's not a religion. It's nothing to believe. Please don't believe in anything. There's only truth to life, and it can never change. Yeah, I mean, like, think about the first person who, well, we say, nobody invented the wheel. It's impossible to invent a geometrical shape, like a sphere or a circle or a globe or a wheel, which is all the same thing, kind of, essentially, right? I mean, there has to be context with that, because a circle isn't, yeah, I mean, right, there's a difference between a globe and a circle, right? A globe is made up of many different circles, though. Anyway, the point is, nobody invented a wheel. That's impossible to do. It's a geometrical shape through mathematical measurements that have always existed, and human beings discovered it when they did. Meaning, you could have a rock out there in nature that was just shaped the exact measurement of a spherical wheel that just rolls evenly on all sides. You can measure from the center out to any one of the edges of the wheel, and it's the same measurement that is undisputed and truth, no matter what you choose to measure it with. It's only the measurement that it is. It's undisputed. It's universal truth that has been there since God. That's what I mean. God created the heavens, the earth, all things that in them are, all things that are in them. All things that are in them is, all things that are there. God created. It's all been there. No matter what anyone wants to think they've come up with, created, invented, or made, that's impossible. It is impossible to make anything as a human being. We just take the things that God has already placed onto the earth and put them together. Again, your science class or your mathematics class, your physics class, I don't know, whatever you want to say, however we want to label something just as it is. The point is there's only truth. They'll tell you the same things in those places. Matter cannot be created or destroyed. Also, mathematics cannot be invented. It can be discovered. So the phrase gets used, don't reinvent the wheel, meaning don't try to make something again that's already been made. We already have that. But spherical shapes, circular shapes, globular things, I don't know if that's how you say that, but things that are a globe. The sound hole of Red the guitar here, it's a circle. Up on this like wicker thing in my room here, there's a circle at the top of it. The tires of our cars or the wheels of our vehicles of any kind, of our bicycles, tricycles, even those we're measuring. 1, 2, that's bicycle. 1, 2, 3, that's tricycle. These are measurements. This is mathematics. This is something that is always and has always and will always been and just is true. And nobody could decide it, and no human being will ever have the possibility to change it. This is measurable truth. And there's not only certain things in life that are measurable truth. You can either measure something as truth or you cannot. And if you cannot, it is not true. There's only truth. To life, ever. There's only truth, period. Our lives are truth. It's either the truth that you're alive or you're not. You can measure the amount of blood pumping through your cardiovascular system of your body. You can measure how many beats your heart has in something else we can measure, which is the seconds in a minute. And we can measure the minutes in an hour. We can measure the hours in a day. We can measure the days in a week, the weeks in a month, the months in a year, the years in a decade, the decades in a century. We can measure these things. This is universal truth. Even if we didn't measure it, it would still be there. Your heart's still beating the amount of times that it is in a minute, in a day, in any other amount of measurement, and in your entire lifetime, from birth to death. Even if you never measure it, it's still truth that it's beating if it's beating. And the amount that it's beating is still the true amount of times it's beating, even if you never measure it. God is still there, even if you do not believe in him. God is truth. It's another name for God. Jesus Christ is the truth. Jesus Christ is God. God is truth. God is Jesus Christ. Your heart's beating the amount of times it is, and that's it. That's what we mean when we say God is. You can say, my heart's beating. Well, how many times? I better know how many times it's beating or else I don't know. Well, if you don't know, it's still beating how many times it's beating. It doesn't matter if you know it or not. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not, that your heart's even beating. It's beating if it's beating. You can measure it. You can find out the truth if it's beating or not. This is what I mean. This is not me versus anyone else. This is truth versus everyone, and I could be any one of the ones. We're all just ones, but even that's a measurement. How many people are out there? Well, there's one. And you could say however many more, but that's what we mean when we say every one. We count. There's one, there's one, there's one, there's one. Okay, let me start over. There's one, there's one, there's one, and there's one. So we add those up, and that's 4. That's a measurement of how many of every one there is. There's only truth. It's impossible to deny truth without being delusional. But again, I was in the state of being delusional. Crazy, bro. That's literal crazy, though. That's what I mean. That's what it means to be crazy in the sense of like being actually delusional. All it could ever possibly mean is just denying truth. But truth is something that no human being could ever decide. So that's why it puts us in our place. That's why there is God. The explanation of God is truth that never changes. And that exists, even if you don't believe it. Your beliefs change. Truth doesn't. That's what I mean. You can measure it. You can measure how many ones there are out there, and that's every one. That's a number you're saying. That's a literal number. In the English language, that is truly what that means. You try to count how many human beings are in a certain area, you count every one that is there. You can do it by twos. You can count every two that is there. You can do it by threes and count every three that is there. But we just say every one. So we don't miss any of our measurements, of the amount, of the truth, of the number, undisputed, of human beings we counted. That's truth. That's it. That's it. We're wrapping it up. I'm done with this. I'm not frustrated. I'm amazed. The point is, with being amazed, what I mean by that is I'm just as human as any other human. And God can use me to explain something like this that not every human understands. But I do. And we all can, and nobody could decide it. But you can measure it. It's truth. You can measure truth. So measuring truth, right? That's the point. Maybe I'm not done with this episode. I just get so dumbfounded, meaning just so I don't even know what to say. I don't know how to believe it, but it's true that I can explain it the way that I just did, because we can go back and measure it. You see what I mean? You can go back, measure the amount of words that I said in here, if that can be heard, what I mean, right? Just meaning, because I could say, I don't even believe that I've said all the words in this that I have. Well, how many do you not believe you've said? We'll go back and measure how many you said, because you only said how many you said. You can measure the truth. See what I mean? It's undisputed. It's documented under the gift of video, as we say. It's just another date-marked documentation under In the Image Clothing Company. We do and always have and always will so much under the gift of video, under In the Image Clothing Company and all four sides. I don't know why I feel like I'm just it sounds like I'm all downtrodden. No, I feel great. What it is, that's the point. That's what I'm saying, is I'm unworthy. I could be the most worthy human being on the planet. I'm unworthy as an imperfect human being to discuss a perfect God, but I can do it. He allows us to. And I just did. Even if you're not even the slightest bit religious, well, I'm not religious either. I just discussed God. The explanation for who God is truth that doesn't change. And I just explained a lot of things in here that are things that are truth that will never change. And nobody could dispute it. Nothing to do with me. I'm just one of the human beings who can understand it. And I just explained it, That's what I mean, is I'm not religious, and I don't say that for the reasons that some people might think that I say it, I guess. The point is, a lot of people probably don't even know why I'm saying that or what I mean by it. And I've explained it in the ways that I have before, but just meaning, usually religion implies you believe in something, but I don't believe in anything. Because God is the truth, and the truth is always there, even if you don't believe it, right? I mean, a lot of what happens when people get really anxious, is their heart rate goes up. The amount of times their heart beats in a minute, or just the amount of heart rates happen in any amount of time that we can measure. Do you see what I mean? You can measure the truth. It'll increase. It'll go up. And so people will get really nervous and anxious, and their heart rate will go up just because it's a bodily reaction that you can measure that's affected by a lot of times external circumstances. Fight or flight or flee or fling or you flew away somewhere, whatever you want to say. These responses the body has, the bodies of any animals that have this, Yeah. Human beings, though, right, as one of the things, these are involuntary things. Your heart rate will just start to increase if you get anxious, even if you don't realize you're anxious. And it's not only when you're anxious that happens, but The point is, you can think your heart rate's a certain rate of beats in a certain amount of measurable time. And you can be wrong about it. And you can measure the truth of it. A lot of times people get so anxious, and then they think their heart is beating too fast, and that makes them more anxious. But no matter how fast you think your heart is beating, you can measure it. You can feel it. You can put your hand on the left side of your chest, but how do we know what's the left side of the chest? Well, there's a center line to the body. It's a bone, the immovable bone of the sternum in the front. And you can go to one side of it. We can call it the left. Whatever side is opposing the other side that you could call the right. That's the left side of the chest because we measure it from the center. It's undisputed. Anyway, you put your hand there and you can feel your heart beating, even if you don't know numbers. It's like we did with the shirts over here. Even if you don't know what the word shirt means, if you can take your physical hand, even if you don't know what the word hand means, if somebody can take their hand and touch yours and show you that and explain to you that that's your hand, and you can use that thing that is your hand and touch this thing that is a shirt. No words have to be there. No numbers have to be there. Truth is truth. You can measure it. You can touch it. It's tangible. And a lot of times, truth doesn't have to be tangible. You can measure void spaces that are not tangible, but they're measurable. Right? I mean, in a vacuum, we can create a vacuum. We can create a box with a certain amount of measurable volume in it. However you want to choose to measure the volume in there, there's only the volume in there that there is. Nobody could have an opinion on it. It's apart from all of us. It's what it is. As in, it's physically apart from or outside of all of us. Like something made by mankind, a little like cube shape. How do we know it's a cube shape? You can measure it, and it's truly a cube shape, if it truly is what we call a cube shape. And we only know what that is through measurements that are universal and true. Anyway, inside there you can use like an actual vacuum and suck out the air, because in our atmosphere there's a measurable amount of air. Air is just a measured amount of what it is. It's like, it's like water. It's the amount of oxygen and the amount of hydrogen that it is. You can measure it, and that's water. H2O. It's the measurement of oxygen and hydrogen. It's undisputed. It's truth, or it doesn't exist. It's not water if it's not the measurement of what means that it's water. And it's like, well, what if I don't want it to be water? Well, you want it to be water if you're going to die of dehydration, And then truth is truth. Well, it always was, but then you might be able to accept it, It's delusion. It's absolute delusion. If you don't think there's truth to life, universal, that could never change. But also, it's the phrase we say often under In the Image Clothing Company: you don't know what you don't know. You can't be held accountable for what you don't know. This is scriptural. This is God saying this to us because that's the truth. You can measure the amount of things you've learned. If there's something you haven't learned, well, you haven't learned it, There's only truth, dude. And it's impossible to dispute without just being delusional. It's just crazy. Anyway, people, they measure things. You're building a house, or a structure of some kind, a building. You're building a building. What I'm doing is building In the Image Clothing Company right now, right? Like we say, everything we do, adding to In the Image Clothing Company is just another building block in the building of In the Image Clothing Company. And like I'm saying, we can measure what we've done. Like this is the 200th measurement of the amount of In the Image Clothing Company podcast episodes that exist as of today's date, which is the 6th of January, 2026, and that's a measurement. January is just a measurement of the year. It's one of the 12 months. 6 is the measurement of the amount of days that we're on throughout the month of January. I don't know if there's 30 or 31 or 28 or something days in January. however many there is, there's the amount that there is, to measure and equal 365 days in this year by adding up each of the months that are broken up into days. Before that, they're broken up into weeks. It's a measurement. And this is all a measurement of however many, whatever we choose to calculate. It's just crazy. It's a measurement of the revolutions of the earth around the sun. It's a measurement of the rotations of the earth around its centered axis. It's actually slightly off center because we can measure the degrees that it's slightly off center as it rotates because it's a globe and we can measure how it moves in space. It's just, there's only truth. It's impossible to deny it without being delusional. It's crazy, dude. This is the truth of life. This is what I mean. The gospel of Jesus Christ is just, let's look at anything and find out what it really is. That's God. Because he's nothing else. God is. He's the great I am. It is that, because that is what it is. We measured it. You can't dispute it. Measure it yourself. You'll get the same number. You can measure truth. Measuring Truth, episode 200 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast here. That's what I'm saying. It's always the same. It'll never change. That's how you know if it's truth. If it's not the same at some point, it's not true. How do you know? You can measure it. You know, they got things that they can do. They can put systems on your body and they can measure your body, the amount of times you breathe per minute, the amount of times your heart beats per minute, the temperature in measurements like Fahrenheit or Celsius, which are just numbered measurements of temperature. Anyway, they can measure these things. You know, the body has the human body's only normal, a video under the main site of In the Image Clothing Company. Also, we just discussed that in life. There's only a normal to everything. Neutral, natural, and normal. They're synonyms within the human body's functioning, within the functioning of bodies of flesh and bone and blood. Like Dante, he's a standard poodle. He's mine, legally. I can measure it. Well, kind of, because I paid a certain amount of monetary value that we measured in exchange for the dog. And that's the truth. You can measure it. It's a certain number. It's mathematics, it's mechanics, it's physics, it's just measurements, it's truth. The angles of the body, right? The ankles bend backwards so the knees can bend forward. The hips bend backwards so the lower back can bend forward. The mid back bends backwards so the upper back, which is really the neck, can bend forward. These are measurements that are undisputed, opposing each other to stay vertical on Earth's centered gravity measurable pole, perpendicular, meaning a 90-degree measured angle to the surface of the Earth. That's gravity's pole. It's impossible to train posture. There's no opinion. You might think I have a claim, but it's measurable truth. Don't believe me? Measure it. Right? That's what I'm saying. But yeah, you're building a house, let's say a building of some kind, whatever it is. You can measure how long you need something to be before you cut it. And you can cut it to the true length to fit in whatever you're building. You're building something with wood. You cut the wood to the length you need it to be for the wood to fit together to build what you need to build. There's only truth to the measurement of what that needs to be to become what you are trying to build. We talk about things being true, like a board being straight. We call it true. We call it truing boards. When you sand off the side of a board, if the board is bent or bowed and not straight, we say the board is not true. And there's machines, you can just sand off parts of the side of the board to make the board be what we call true. It's called truing the board through a measurement of seeing if the side is flat. It's measurable. Truth. And it's in the literal wording. That's what it's, you true a board. When you're like hanging a photograph or a painting or a picture of some kind on a wall, you can use a level, a little thing with a little bubble of air inside of fluid. And as you tip it to one direction, the air, because it's less dense in a measurable amount of density, okay, truth, than the liquid in there, which is more dense in a measurable amount of true density, depending on which side you tip the level to, the less dense in the measurable amount of true density air bubble will rise, as the more dense in a measurable amount of true density liquid in the level will settle or fall, right? Depending on which side you tip it to. It's like the scale we were saying earlier. Weight on one side of the center of something that's heavier or more dense than the weight on the other side of the center of something that's less dense will just fall lower with Earth's gravity pivoting on the center point, because that's the true center or the measurable center. It's undisputed. You'll never get it to sit even or level unless it's measurably, truly centered. It's impossible to have an opinion on it. This is truth, and it exists always, and before we ever were here as human beings to even know about it. That's God. He's always been here. In the beginning, he designed it all, but he had to be there first to do that. Wow, how does that work? Well, don't think about it too hard, but it's true. It's undisputed. So I mean, math equations have always been math equations, even before there were math equations. And that's true. Don't think about it too hard. It's God. The all-knowing, the almighty. You'll never understand him fully in this life. You couldn't. It's impossible. It's impossible to know everything in this life. You can be delusional, though. That's what I mean. The only way you can deny truth is by being delusional. The truth is, we'll never know everything in this life. You can measure it. Take a quiz. If you can make a quiz of every single thing that existed, if somebody didn't get every single answer correct, well, you measured it, and the truth is they don't know everything. It's measurable truth. We just measure truth there. You can measure truth. Measuring truth, episode 200 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. Anyway, people out there surveying the land, to find out what's level. People with an actual level like that on a picture frame or a photograph frame, a painting, a drawing, on the wall or whatever it is. I mean, there's just measurable truth. Always. Meaning, truth is truth, and it's always measurable. That's how you really say that. It's not just like, there's some things that are measurable truth. It's truth can always be measured, or it's not true. That's the point. And anything that you can't measure isn't true. And that's the point. Truth is truth. God is. And that's it. Anyway, you can't dispute it. Ever. No claim, no opinion, no religion, no belief, no new information. That's what I say with what we do under all four sides of In the Image Clothing Company. We're not ever trying to get anything new. That's impossible. What I was saying with the wheel is no human being ever invented the wheel, so we can't reinvent the wheel, even if you wanted to try to. You didn't invent the wheel. Whoever first found out about it, it's always been there. It's a measurement that has always existed. You can find out that turning something from whatever it was into the measurement of what we could call a wheel will roll, but it's going to roll anyway. There's a lot of rocks and rivers that are just about exactly a sphere because they're rolling down the river as the water is pushing them. And they've always been doing that before any human being ever tried to shape something into a wheel. I mean, there's even weeds that are very spherical or circular, like tumbleweeds, we call them, here in the desert of Utah. Weeds that'll blow in the wind and they'll roll across the ground. They did that before human beings ever existed. Human beings were the last thing God created before he took a rest. In 5 days, God created the earth and everything that's here. Everything that's not here, if it is here. Wow, let's say it like that, because that's crazy. Are you crazed yet? Are you scared? I mean, that's kind of please. God is the truth. God, is perfect love. Perfect love casts out all fear. Jesus Christ is God. Pray to God in the name of Jesus Christ. You'll find the truth. You can find the truth in your math class. You can. And in your physics class. You can find the truth in your science class. Science and Christianity are not opposites. As long as you get down to the truth through science, it's the exact same thing you'd find in the Word of God. It's measurable. Truth. That's what we're doing. If we're followers of Jesus Christ, disciples of Jesus Christ, followers of God, Christians, sons and daughters of God, if we are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or any Christian church out there doing all they can to get to God as He truly is, okay, that none of us could decide. I mean, yeah, you're doing the same thing that they're doing in the science rooms with their scientific method, or in the math classes with their trigonometry, their geometry, their algebra. I don't even know all the different types of math, but right? I mean, any math equation that gets you to truth, that's God. It's measurable. It'll never change. If you measured it and it is what it is, that's what it is, and that's it. Anybody else can measure it. It's the same thing. But who? Anybody else, right? The body, physicality-wise, we can measure. Like I was saying earlier, you can measure the amount of bones in the body. There's only the amount of bones in the body there is. You can have people with some, fairly different bodies, but the universal baseline human being, you can measure it. As in, calculate the amount of bones in it, calculate the range that each motion in it has in degrees of measurable rotations or hinges. The body's just a lever system. It's just a hinge system. It's just rotations. It's just mechanics. It's impossible to dispute that. And it's impossible to train it. It's impossible to train the human body because its neutral, relaxed state is Earth's centered gravity pull that will never change and is measurable. Like the arms hanging down at the sides, the fingertips are the shoulders if the body's residing in its neutral positions, which is the only way the human body can ever actually work, which is just how it works, unaltered. But we have a lot of things that can alter the body. Shoes, clothing, ropes, like shoelaces or drawstrings, oversized clothing, imbalances in clothing of any kind. We give a lot of free modifications in clothing under In the Image Clothing Company's main side. Well, just where we do on any of the 4 sides of In the Image Clothing Company. The main side of In the Image Clothing Company, though, is where we put the focus with allowing the body to work. Anyway, it's measurable. It's truth. And that's what I'm saying. The episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Damning Yourself. The way you dam a river, you stop its progression, you put something in the way and you block it. This is what we do to ourselves if we don't accept truth. And a lot of what I said in that episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Damning Yourself is if you don't accept the truth within what we do under In the Image Clothing Company, meaning whatever we do that is aligning with the truth of God, we don't get to decide, but we can get an understanding of God and relay the truth of God that has always been before we ever existed as human beings. Like mathematics, like the wheel, which is mathematics, that's what I mean, right? Yeah, anything that's existed always is truth. Anything that hasn't isn't true. That's as it is. That's it. That's that. And what I'm saying is, that's what we do under In the Image Clothing Company is we get down to measurable truth. That's how I say don't believe us. It doesn't matter if you believe that a wheel will roll if it's truly a wheel. But how do you know if it's truly a wheel? Well, you measure it. And you find out that it truly is because you can't dispute the measurements. They're universal. Look at this cute dog. Hi, Dante. I love Dante. That's what I say to him. Just like that is what I mean. It's funny. But what I'm saying is, it doesn't matter if you're in mathematics, if you're in science, if you're in religion, if you're somebody who doesn't believe in anything, you don't even want to believe that math is true or something, right? There's still truth and it's measurable and it applies to you. It's like what I say, you don't have to care about clothing if it's placed on you imbalanced. And how do we know? Well, there's a measurement we can take from the center line of the body out to the edge of the shoulder through the bones that are immovable, like the collarbone itself, for example, or the hip structure, or the degrees of rotations in the body. But anyway, the clothing placed on us, we can measure it from the center of it to the outsides of it, meshing with the outsides of the shoulders from the center line of the body. For example, as one of the things, just like a clothing item we could call a top. You don't have to care, but if clothing is imbalanced and is placed on your body, it's affecting you. And no opinion could ever decide that. But measurements can, and they're true. Even if you don't believe there's universal truth, there is. It doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what I could try to choose to believe either. It's nothing to do with me, but I'm the one that delivered this piece of truth, if you will. After listening to this, or watching and listening, if you're in visual plus audio, of episode 200 here of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, titled Measuring Truth, it would be impossible for you to deny that there's universal truth. Just from what one human being and equal to you, me, little old Evan Strong, the kid that I am and always, just what I said alone in this, couple hour long, however long it is, I don't know the length of it as of right now, but we can measure it through seconds, and this little device has been doing that for me as I've been speaking here. Okay, that's what I'm saying. This is all you'd ever need to know in your life. Nothing to do with me other than I delivered this for you to be able to know that there is universal truth and you couldn't possibly dispute it. I've said enough in here that what I've said in here, there's at least some in this that applies to literally every human being on the planet. That as long as you have the cognitive ability in your own individualistic situation, people are different, but I'm just saying that to be clear, as long as you do, personally, which if you don't, okay, but have the cognitive ability to understand what I've spoken in here, like the words that I've said, even if you don't fully comprehend all that I've explained, if you've heard the words I've said in here, there's no possible way you could dispute that there is undisputed universal truth, because you can measure it. You can measure it if I didn't exist to tell you that it was true or not. And you can measure it before you existed. You wouldn't be doing it then, but somebody else could measure it and it'd be the same measurement. If it's true, it'll never change. It's like the episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled North Star. North is north to every human being on the planet, even if they don't want to believe that it is. It's actually a magnetic field of poles of the earth that's just a rock. And always has been before you existed to measure it. If we ever measure anything or not, that doesn't really matter. We can never measure anything, and who cares? Meaning it's still what it is, if you walk somewhere, it takes the amount of steps it takes to get there if you measure it or not. It takes the amount of time it takes to walk somewhere if you measure it or not. You go across the same distance in measurement of the earth to get to wherever you walked to, even if you measure it or not, in relation with the size of the planet. Even if you don't measure how big the planet is, you're still just the only size that you are in measurement in relation to the size of the planet. It's a physical thing that you can do a physical measurement to figure out how large it is. And it's always been what it is if it is what it is. Let's say, maybe the size of something could change, but the measurement of it's always still the measurement of it. Right? The measurement still is the length that the measurement is, regardless of what you're measuring. That's what I mean. The thing you're measuring could change, but the measurement calculation you're using will never change. Shoot. You can always get to it. You can always get to truth. No matter how deep you feel you have to go or how far you feel you have to go, it never leaves. It couldn't. It's impossible for it to. And really, that's just God when he says it's impossible for him to deny himself. It's impossible for him to deny his word. God is the truth. You can't deny truth. That's impossible without just being delusional. That word, it's hard-hitting because it's not an insult. It's the truth, right? Anyway, man, my jaw, my ear cartilage, really, right? That TMJ, you know if you know. Documented and date marked under past episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, just allowing the body to work, getting out of chronic patterning and scar tissue that's been built up through things like oversized clothing, imbalances in clothing, and ropes introduced to the body like shoelaces, drawstrings, but anything we could tie one side over the other in the body. Dante and I filmed a video yesterday under the main site of In the Image Clothing Company titled Left-Handed Knots versus Right-Handed Knots, and how we need right-handed knots on the left side of our body and left-handed knots on the right side of our body. In anything we tie in knots and hold in our hands, in our shoelaces, tying the knots over toward the center line of the body, which is what we show within In the Image Clothing Company's shoelace technique. It's no opinion. You can measure the degree of rotation a knot will cause if you tie one side of it over the other and put it around your ankle, right? And there's rotations in the leg of the body. The ankle is just part of the leg of the body. It's just measurable truth. It's not an opinion. That's why I'm so bold. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled In the Image Clothing Company's Shoelace Technique. And I'm so bold in it because it's truth. It doesn't matter if I was bold or not, or if I said it or not, it's still truth. And so I said it so you hear it. I said it in a way that you can hear it, is what I mean. If you're willing to, A lot of people aren't willing to accept that there's truth. It doesn't change that there's truth. A lot of people, maybe they move away from somebody or somebody moves away from them. But again, some body, okay, the human body of some human has moved from another human in physical measurable distance away from them, right? Measurable truth of a distance. And they don't want to believe that person is as far away as they are now. Well, you can measure it. You don't have to believe in anything. They're only where they are in relation to you. In any way that you could possibly measure it, it's the measurement that it is, and it couldn't be anything else if you can measure it. It's truth. I mean, anyway, God exists, and he's what we call ever-present. He's always now. He's infinite. He's perfect. He doesn't leave. Ow, my knee. Ouch. You can't measure the distance that God is away from you because he's not away from you. He's always here and now. That's the truth, right? That's what I mean. The measurements don't go farther away than just however far they are. Even if they feel farther. Like somebody who you feel like you're, falling away from, like you had a friendship with someone and you feel so distant from them, but they didn't move from their physical location on the earth and you didn't either. You're still the same measurement away, but you feel farther away. The truth is you're not. Not physically in a measurable distance, at least. Measurable truth. Look how Dante just has so much measurable truth to him. I mean it, right? Measuring truth in Dante, like what I'm saying, allowing the body to work and letting dogs stay natural. It's about the physical operation of the mechanical machines of the human beings or the dogs. A lot of our information on In the Image Clothing Company Poodles with letting dogs stay natural applies to all dogs. Well, most all of it does, except for things that are very poodle specific. Just the breed of the poodle. But it's pretty well universal to all dogs, just about. But then most all animals across the earth too, letting dogs stay natural under In the Image Clothing Company Poodles. That information, applies to. Dante can just curl up so tight. We can measure the degree of motion in all the individual bones of his spine we call vertebrae, from the tip of the tail of Dante to the base of his skull. Those are the two ends of his spine. And each one of the bones in the spine are called vertebrae, and they have a measurable amount of motion in them. And as they all connect, they move together in a way we can physically measure. You can measure the truth, measuring truth. You can measure how curled up Dante is in a way that's undisputed. No matter what you want to believe about it, or if you care to even measure it. It doesn't matter if you do measure it or not. It's still a true measurement. Look at him lick himself. Oh, he's actually just kicking himself in the face right then. I love you, Dante. Anyway, you can measure it, the degrees of motion in the bones in relation to each other, and then all of them connecting the entire spine as a whole. You can measure it. And that's the thing, is I was noticing this a day or two ago, give or take. Dante actually curls up in a circle. He puts his nose at the same location of the tip of his tail, like right now. He really does. The tip of his tail and the tip of his nose are right next to each other. His entire body curls into, a circle. Not exactly a perfect circle measurement-wise, but just talk about measurements. You can measure the truth. It is what it is. Look at... He was just kicking inside his own mouth with his back foot. Man, I understand real love, I didn't in the past, but I get it. And I have real love for Dante, like like the way people love their kids, That's crazy. It's just so funny. It's so funny. I love Dante. Look at this dog. What's up? You beautiful boy. He's such a pretty boy. Anyway, you can measure truth, and you can't dispute it. And so it doesn't matter what you believe. You don't believe in anything, and there's still measurements that line up, and they always will because they're true. Like the boards, when they're flat, they're still that's when they're true. Like when you true something you're trying to measure. I mean, that's the thing. You true a scale, or you zero a scale. Zero is essentially the truth. It's the center measurement between +1 and -1. I just laugh because it's that real. That's what I mean. You can come up with just about an infinite amount of, maybe an infinite amount. I don't know how that really works mathematically, but we can measure the truth of it to find out. That's what I mean. Is you could come out with, at least just about an infinite amount of examples of what you could measure as being true. And so you couldn't possibly dispute it. That's what I mean. No matter what you personally need for you to see that there's universal truth, you can have that be shown to you. There is a way you're going to understand it if you're willing to, because it's there. You couldn't deny it. But you might need a way that, you can personally see it for you to be able to understand it. Regardless, though, it's there. You just have to understand it's there. Even if you don't understand it's there, it's still there. All those math equations that just work, they're there even if you don't understand them. They're true measurements even if you don't believe they are, or know how to do them, or know them yet. It's like God. He's true. He's there even if you don't know him yet. That's why we preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, or deliver the good news of God, right? Gospel means good news. Jesus Christ is God. Just literal translation, that's what that means, phrasing-wise. That's why we say it, because God is the Word. Look at my dog. Well, maybe not right now. He's licking his self, his reproductive parts, but he's just so cool, man. I love Dante so much. Anyway, we discussed how to be a good owner of dogs under In the Image Clothing Company poodles. holding leashes naturally, or slip leads. We love slip leads. Slip leads have a misunderstanding around them by a lot of people. Slip leads are amazing. But how to hold these things naturally so we don't alter our bodies as the owners of dogs. What are you doing? I don't know. He's like chewing on his own leg, and it's like he found something in it. What'd you find? How? Where are you going? Hey. Hey. You good boy. You come over here? Yeah, you come over here. Good. Come. Yeah. Anyway, I love Dante. Yeah. What I'm saying is, hi. What is up? You're just so ridiculously chill. I love you so much. You can measure truth. And a lot of times we like want to calculate something, but we're like, man, I wish I knew how to do the math of this. I don't know how to figure out how this is going to work the best. Look how much he loves me. He just like, that's what I said earlier. He was like nuzzling up against me the way that a cat does. Dante is so amazing. He is just the most wonderful. Look at him. He's just, look at him. He paws me on the chest. He's just trying to get closer to me when he's here, like right between where my legs are. I'm sitting on the ground, you know, for those of you in audio only, just so you can have a little understanding of what's going on. I love Dante so much. Anyway, yeah, a lot of times you won't even know how to calculate something, but it can be calculated. So you're like, man, I wish I knew how to do this math to figure this thing out right now so that I could figure out how to have this line up or something. That's the point, is there's a math equation that'll get to the truth of it, and you just don't know it. Maybe truth is truth. It's measurable. It's always there, even if you don't know it. So anyway, yeah, keeping less dogs in shelters and more dogs at homes through showing proper breeding of dogs, and yeah, being good owners of dogs. That starts before we ever even have dogs be born. Dante was a rescue, you know, from the South Utah Valley Animal Shelter. In times and places, but if we can advocate for proper breeding, before we ever breed improperly bred dogs that then end up in shelters so often, then you're fixing the problem before it ever starts. You know, when you could talk about, you know, advocating for adopting dogs, well, just advocate for breeding properly beforehand. Advocate for doing all you can to keep your dog at homes before they ever end up in a shelter, and then we don't have to ever advocate for adopting dogs, right? That's what we do under In the Image Clothing Company Poodles. Yeah, because Dante's an awesome dog because he's an awesome dog, not because he's a rescue. He was an awesome dog before he ever had to be rescued. See what I mean? He's just amazing. I just happened to rescue him. And he's a true rescue in what that means. He needed a lot of help. More than I realized when I adopted him, actually. Like physically, you know. I've done a lot to him physically and, you know, for him in all the ways that I have. We really know a lot of what it means to be a good owner of dogs and how to keep dogs natural and healthy. That's what, you know, natural and healthy are essentially synonyms in the ways that we use it like that, you know, here under In the Image Clothing Company with letting dogs stay natural. It's like just saying letting dogs stay healthy. But anyway, yeah, you know, you can measure things. And so we do, you know, showing the proper length of leashes and leads, you know, like a slip lead for a dog, for an obedient dog, for a healthy, physically, mechanically healthy, you know, body structure wise, mechanics of the, you know, what we could call posture of the owner of the dog, but also for that in the dog as well. And anyway, these things are just measurable truths. So Yeah. Man. Right. It is what it is. Measurements, okay? I mean, even what you think of as posture, it's a measurable truth. How straight up you can stand. It's like, wow, that person stands really straight. And then you you label it as they have good posture. No, they're just standing in a measurable degree of bends throughout their body from the tip of their feet. How do we word that? From the bottom of the heels of their feet to the top of the head. And really, it's the tips of the fingers. When we raise our hands above our heads, that's the other end of our bodies from the bottom of our feet, right? They have a properly equally opposing measurable amount of degree in bend in their body from the bottom of it to the top of it on Earth's centered gravity pole. That's the same thing as what people say when they say, hey, they've got good posture, right? You can measure the truth of posture. You can't cause it to happen. You can let it be there, but you're only going to stand vertical if you have a measurable degree of opposing bends to stand vertical on Earth's gravity's pull. It's impossible to train the human body. It's undisputed. You can measure it. It's measurable truth, right? Measuring truth. Episode 200 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. So that's what I mean when I say what I do. And that's what I say because it's true. What I say is that's what I say. I just say what I say, so condemn me for it. Think you know what I'm doing and you're wrong if it's not true. This dog puts me in my place, man. I just get so ridiculously humbled. Like at the beginning of this, when I said I want to smack him, I meant it. And I would. Yikes. I disciplined Dante big time. This is me like just totally being transparent. I mean, yeah, I get a lot of it. I get pretty physical with Dante sometimes, you know. We got to remember they're just animals. Dogs are pack animals. And they're not going to listen to you if you're not, in their eyes, the alpha dog. That's the truth. That's not some kind of like big egoic, Evan Strong, big tough man talk, right? I'm Evan Strong, by the way, in case you maybe forgot or don't know. I said it at the beginning of this, but the founder of In the Image Clothing Company, in this for life to lead it. And, you just... What I'm saying is, I was going to smack him because he was eating something that I didn't know if it was going to be poisonous for him or not. Because we had, work done on the ceiling. And there's this is what I mean. It's truth. I'm not trying to make something be something. This blue thing you can see in the very bottom corner of the frame here, for those of you in visual plus audio of this numbered episode 200, right, of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. You can measure truth, bro. I can measure truth. You can measure truth. Truth is truth, even if we don't measure it, dude. It's just so real. It's true. There's only truth. Anyway, this tarp's still here because we're still in the process of the fixing of the ceiling here, so yeah. It just is what it is. I didn't know if there was something toxic and poisonous on the floor here that if Dante would eat, he could potentially be physically harmed by it. That's why I was going to smack him. It was out of love. Like, Dante, I don't even know what to do with you. Because I don't want him to get hurt. I don't want negative repercussions to come when Dante has behaviors that could, be damaging to him. It's out of love. That's what I'm saying. So there you go. Anyway, you can measure truth. You can measure the truth of how hard I hit Dante sometimes, and boy, do I. That's rough, I get it, but you got to get where stuff is coming from before you can have an opinion on what's going on, because your opinions don't change what's going on. Anyway, just me being transparent there with a little bit of information. Dante loves me so much. Dante and I have this like mutual love. Look at him just look at me right now as I'm speaking. He's just staring straight at me as I'm speaking to the camera here. Dante, you a good boy? Oh my gosh. I love him so much. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's unreal. Oh my gosh. Dante, dog. Anyway, you can measure truth, man. Yeah. Okay. And sometimes it's like a safety thing, you know. That's the thing, is if you didn't want to believe, well, you don't have to believe in anything, but if you tried to think that it mattered, it's not me versus you, it's any human being versus truth. And we don't need to verse the truth, we need to accept it. It's only on our end if we're versing something like that, you know, that is true. What I mean is, it's damaging, you know. It's potentially life ending if you want to think that there's not universal truth. It's things like roller coasters, you know. They measure the amount of g force, which is like the force through inertia and gravity, and you know what I mean, whatever it is, like centrifugal force type stuff, you know. Again, physics, mathematics, real tangible, even science, whatever labeling, these are just words that are explaining truth if they're getting down to truth. So whatever label you want to choose to explain something just as it is, it's just truth. The labels are just words. But words only mean what words mean. That's essentially the same thing as saying truth is truth, because the word truth means what the word truth means. We could say guitar is guitar, Evan is Evan, Dante is Dante, right? That's what we're saying with truth is truth. It's an explanation, is what it is. In all simplicity, meaning that's as simple as it could be explained, basically, you know, that's what we're saying there, is truth. It's like just saying God. But who is God? Well, God is God. What is truth? Well, truth is truth. It's, you know, you say, what is apple? Well, apple is apple. It's only what it is. It's a word. What is a word? A word is a word. You know, truth is truth. God is God. Anyway, you can measure these things. What am I measuring here? What were we discussing? Oh, roller coasters. You can measure the amount of force it puts on the human body to have a roller coaster. You know, go a certain amount of speed and then turn really quickly. It puts a lot of force against your body because of measurable things like the pull of gravity and, you know, again, scientific universal laws, like, you know, things in motion want to stay in motion, you know, everything has an equal and opposite reaction in whatever way that's exactly worded. Well, in the gospel of Jesus Christ, we discussed there's opposition in all things. You can measure it. We've discussed a lot of that in this, how there's just one side of something because you can measure the distance from the center of it, and there's another side to it measured from the center of it. Those are opposite sides. There's opposition to the center line that you can measure, or there's no such thing. But there is, and it exists, and so you have to be able to measure it. You can always measure truth. It's truth. It doesn't change. Even that, the measurement of how much something changes or doesn't, that's a measurement. Something that doesn't change, you can measure it not changing. The measurement is the same as it was in the beginning. The measurement of change hasn't happened because it's still true if it ever was. It always will be. This is what I'm saying, dude. I don't care who believes anything. I ask, it's almost a plead. Oh, I mean, it is a plead. You know, for your sake. I'm not pleading for things from other human beings. You know, we only plead to God if we're doing it correct. You know, that's just how it is. That's the truth, right? Why? Because we plead for thee or to the truth, and God is the truth. That's what I'm saying. Is it is a plead for nobody ever to believe anything, because then we have truth. That's essentially me pleading to God, because that's me pleading for truth or pleading to truth. God is truth. See, it just always comes back. It always comes, as we could say, full circle, which is a measurement, because it keeps rolling, you know, from where it once was. I was going to say that earlier when I was discussing how no human being ever invented a wheel. That's impossible. It's just mathematics that have always existed since always. Okay, since God, who has always existed. God is mathematics. God is truth. Mathematics are the true explanation of a measurement of something. Okay, it's truth. It's undisputed for everything, everyone, every time, ever, always. It's God, the same, always, 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 always. Always. Truth is truth, always. And I couldn't possibly have an opinion on truth because I don't get to decide it. But the truth about a wheel is if you start a wheel in one location and you like mark it or measure it on the Earth's surface, and you roll the wheel until it goes one full measured rotation or revolution back to the same part on the wheel that it started on the ground at, the measurement of how far it's traveled on the surface of the planet is the same measurement around the circumference or the outside of the wheel. It's just measurable truth, meaning truth is always measurable and it always exists. You couldn't have an opinion on it that mattered. Neither could I. So anyway, measurable truth, right? Measuring truth. And so, I mean, that's I mean, how can you measure if the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is true? Measure the change in your life that's occurred for the better after, following the teachings of Jesus Christ through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I mean, that's a way we could say that that's measurable truth, right? The improvement in your life that you can measure, the understandings that deepen, that you can measure. Do you see what I mean? It's just what it is. You can measure it. You can measure God. Yeah, I mean, you're always doing that if you're measuring something that's true. That is God. God is true. Okay, or truth. But how can you measure your relationship with God? You really truly can. In a literal, measurable way, you can measure your relationship with God and its progression, because you can measure, I mean, the improvement in your life, the amount of times you can overcome things, right? Or the amount of things you can overcome that you weren't able to in the past when you're relying on God, once you learn who He is and try to follow Him to the best of, all of our imperfect ways as just being imperfect sons and daughters of a perfect God. Jesus Christ is God. And so that's what I mean. Don't believe me, but you can measure it, That's the thing. You couldn't have a scripture like the one that says, if you draw near to me, I'll draw near to you. This is Jesus Christ, our God Himself speaking. We couldn't draw nearer to God, and God couldn't draw nearer to us if we couldn't measure it. It's truth. It's measurable, right? So you can try to say, well, I mean, where are the numbers in measuring your relationship with God? Well, you can. The numbered amount of times you read your scriptures, the numbered amount of times you pray to God in the name of Jesus Christ, the amount of numbered times you go to church in a month or in a year, and it doesn't have to be all structured every certain way for every person. We're not trying to be cookie cutter followers of God, but we are trying to get closer to God in a way we truly can measure. And you can. Through that way, through numbers, but also, just through the measurement of contentment that you have, or acceptance, that you can acquire the closer you get to God. And you can measure these things, and that's a personal thing to you that you'll know more than I could try to tell you how to understand when you're content, or if you're content, or when you're joyful versus trying to be happy, which is just fleeting. Happiness is very fleeting and, momentary. Joy is eternal, and it comes from Jesus Christ only. Yeah. So, I mean, there are things you can measure that may not seem measurable, like spirituality, if you want to call it that, right? Your relationship with Jesus Christ, who is God overall, you can measure it. You can. There are ways you can, and in ways you can't dispute personally. That's what I mean. There is measurable truth. Truth is always measurable. right? Measuring truth. It's just cool, man, because I'm in this for life. That's an episode title of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, spoken by me, Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company, who is in this for life. And what I'm saying is that is what we're doing, and we've measured it now up until the number 200. We're documenting things that are just building In the Image Clothing Company bigger and bigger each time we do it, for the sake of the impact, And that's why we're here. Things like poodle parade events under In the Image Clothing Company poodles. Bring your poodles, purebred of any size or mixed poodles of any size. And then subcategories of poodle parade events, things like clean the creek or rid the rubbish, where we actually do things for the environment. You can measure things, man. You can measure the amount of items of trash you pick up off the surface of the earth. You can have all the claims you want on if the planet's being altered by what we're doing as human beings or not, and you can believe anything you want. Well, can we measure the truth of how many items of trash you can just walk across a riverbank and find and pick up and throw away? Where are you throwing it away to? Back on the earth, just a different location. You're filling the land in a landfill. You can measure the height of the trash that's piled up. It's truth. That's what I mean. You can measure temperatures statistically over time, and it's truth. It's not a dispute of things like global weather changes or something like this. Do you see what I mean? It's undisputed. It's measuring truth. There's only truth. And if truth is there, you can measure it. And there's the ability to measure things because mathematics exist, and they always have. It's just what it is, man. That's it. You can measure it. You can always measure truth, and you can't dispute it. You can't dispute it, Anyway, clothing. Clothing. I don't know if we're gonna discuss where clothing sits in this. I mean, it's just so many places posted publicly, date marked, time stamped. When I say time stamped, I just mean it's not going anywhere. Stamped in time of the date marks. We're not holding anything back anytime that we don't say where clothing sits. Just to not alter the body. I just say it like that because we post our things publicly and they're just there. So we just do so much, and so you go find it if you want. It's there. If it's there, under In the Image Clothing Company. Anyway, you can measure truth, man. That might be where we leave this. Just but I said that earlier. It's probably like an hour ago, give or take, maybe. I mean, it's quite a while ago from now. We can measure it, right? It's truth, how long ago it was, regardless of how long I think it was ago or want to believe it was ago, right? It's like, you see what I mean? You can always measure truth. It's always there. So, anyway, dude, I just, I don't care what you care about. I don't care what you believe in. I don't care if you think I have a belief I push here as the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. I don't. I don't care if you think that I just believe that Jesus Christ is God. I don't. I don't believe Jesus Christ is God. I don't believe in Jesus Christ. And let's sit on that. You hear that, correct? Because that implies that I could just believe that he isn't who he is, and that can matter. But it doesn't matter if I believe something or not. Jesus Christ is God. I know that. I have faith in Jesus Christ. I love Jesus Christ. I'm not trying to get anybody to believe in anything, because that does imply that you could choose, and as if your choice was determining the thing. You can choose to believe in Jesus Christ today, and you can choose to not believe in him tomorrow. You can have faith that he's there even if it's hard to believe that he is. And the truth is he's there even if you don't believe that he is. Right? And if it is true, which it is, that when we draw near to God, he will draw nearer to us, then we'd have to be able to measure that for it to be true. And you can. And it may be a different measurement. Well, it wouldn't have to be. In some ways, it could be a literal mathematical measurement, but also just in any way you can measure anything in a way that you couldn't dispute. Yeah, you can measure how near you draw to God and how God is drawing nearer to you in a way you couldn't possibly dispute. So that's me saying truth is truth. So don't believe me. And now that we're 200 episodes into me, Evan Strong, delivering sermons on Jesus Christ, don't believe any one of them. See if it's true. And we're just going to continue as we continue. I mean, I it's not a claim. I'm in this for life. Meaning, it's not some startup company. It's not a hope or a dream. I don't care for anything besides the will of God, meaning the plan that Jesus Christ has for me. And this is his plan for me. And even if I believed it was or believed it wasn't or just wanted to think that it was, I'm just speaking truth here as the goal. I'm imperfect at doing it, as we all are imperfect at doing anything. Just being imperfect human beings in this life. I mean, you make one mistake and you're imperfect. And you know you've made mistakes. I guarantee that, no matter who you are. I guarantee that. Because it's the truth. We're here to make mistakes, and you can measure it. You can measure the times you've messed up, and you probably do, right? Yeah. Oh, shoot. How mean is Evan Strong? Well, who is it that ye say that I am, right? That's what Jesus Christ asks to us. I'm only who I am. I'm only saying what I'm saying. You can interpret it all the ways you think you want it to be, and you're wrong. I only said what I said. Doesn't mean that I'm right, but it means that there's truth to what I actually said, being just what I said only and nothing else. Okay? Yeah, that's so cool, man. Still a kid and always. And now I have a dog. What I mean is, yeah, a lot of what dogs do for human beings is get them to their authentic self. We discussed that's a big reason for in the Image Clothing Company poodles, getting people authentic and breaking down their walls that they put up. Like the big bad wolf blowing the house down, man. We understand the truth that the earth is just the earth and we can take parts of it and build something, but it always comes crumbling down. So break down your own walls, bash them in with a big old sledgehammer, and measure the degree of rotation it takes to swing that thing. Oh, shoot. Because that's the truth. I mean, what do you want? You want to believe in something? No, you want the truth. Well, yeah, what do you want? It's an episode title of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. All you want is truth. I know it. Even if you don't know it, you that's the truth. Yeah. But it's just stuff you can measure. That's the point. Because you want to be able to measure things. You don't want to have to try to believe someone on something and have them claim that it's what it is. You want to be able to measure it and just know it is what it is. And so that's the truth. You can always measure truth, and it always is the truth if you can measure it. What else could you possibly do? How else could you possibly claim anything in life? Claims are claims, but truth is truth. That's what I mean. Words only mean what words mean. And so either you can measure something and it is what it is, or you can measure something and it isn't what you thought it was, and it still is only what it is. You measure things to get down to the truth. God, man, that's crazy. You always can. I mean, it's always just a measurable thing. Measuring truth, bro. Yeah. I mean, think about like fingerprints, What are you doing when you try to find out who did something that, people are not owning up to? You can take the fingerprints or the little designs on the pads of our fingers as human beings. You can measure the space between the little lines there that are just little textured surfaces to to allow us to grip to things. You can measure the length of those lines, the space between those lines, the shape and outline of the lines of the fingertip of a human being to find the truth of who committed a crime. That's measurable truth. It's undisputed. It always will be. Anyway, we'll leave it right there. Thank you. Goodbye.